Good morning everyone. You joined me on the way to Wentbridge House this morning. Wentbridge House is quite close by to me. It's only about 20 minutes away. It's just off the A1 near Pontefract. It's actually where my parents got married, or at least had a reception after their registry office service in 1984, it must have been, something like that. I will be photographing the wedding of Carl and John there in a few months' time in July. So I'm heading there to meet with Chloe, one of the wedding coordinators. Ellie, I think, is the assigned coordinator for Carl and John's wedding, but I've raced in at an opportunity that I've got to get there. Wentbridge are actually having a showcase on Sunday the 17th of March, which is this Sunday. I'm not going to get this video out prior to that, unfortunately. I'm not going to have time to edit and put it out. And I'm unfortunately not able to get to the showcase because I'm heading down to the photography show this weekend. Wentbridge House is a 4-star Georgian country manor hotel that's privately owned and has been run as a hotel over the last 60 years. They offer exclusive use. There's only one wedding per day for guest lists of up to 130. Depending on size of ceremony, you have a choice of the Tudor room for up to 24 guests. The Leatham Suite has a ceremony capacity, and I imagine also a wedding breakfast capacity, don't quote me, check me on that, of 70. And the Crystal Suite allows for ceremonies and wedding breakfasts of up to 130. Evening reception capacity maxes out at 180 guests. You also have beautiful gardens to make use of at Wentbridge House. They've recently been redesigned by a Royal Horticulture Society Chelsea Flower Show Gold Medal winner. And as you drive through the village of Wentbridge, which I often do, you can see the beautiful folly in the garden, which can be the setting for your outdoor ceremony if you so wish. Carl is a teacher. I used to be a former teacher, and we had a laugh when we were consulting about their wedding on a Zoom call when he said, "Ooh, no," when I said whether they were going for an outdoor ceremony. He thought that the first week of the summer holidays in July was too great a risk of rain. And I know exactly what he means, because I could always guarantee as a teacher that the May half term was absolutely gorgeous, and then sod's law would be that the beginning of the summer was not so hot a deal. So the outdoor folly is yours for a ceremony if you so wish. If you book that and the absolute worst comes to the worst in regard to weather, Wentbridge do offer a partial refund if you've got to retreat into one of the indoor spaces. But with exclusive use of venue, there's no lack of choice in regard to those spaces anyway. You've got 3 to choose from according to different capacities. You could potentially use the outdoor space for ceremony and then, of course, move on to your drinks reception, and then either way, your evening reception is going to be in one of the indoor suites. Carl's intention for his and John's wedding, and mine, is that we will still go out and utilise the garden spaces, of course, for some afternoon and maybe even blue hour photography, depending on their vibe and what they want to go for. The outdoor garden space will be wonderful for both afternoon and blue hour photography. In the afternoon, because of the direction of how the lawn is facing, we'll be able to make use of the folly as both a beautiful backdrop and have the direction of sunlight be backlighting us, as we will with the beautiful huge beech tree, I think it's a beech, just beyond the folly as well. So we'll be able to get both of those in for a beautiful backdrop, but at the same time we'll be backlighting so that you've got beautiful golden haloed light as the rim around your hair light, which is really, really beautiful. And dare I say, on the right day, a bit Californian, the proud Yorkshireman that I am. During the ceremony itself, the way that the folly is orientated, you'll probably have a material or carpet or cloth aisle down the middle, decor and floristry as you wish, and seating to either side. I was talking at Ringwood Hall recently about probably favouring the bride's side of the aisle. In this instance, of course, it will be 2 grooms, but I'll actually be aiming in this instance probably to be at what would traditionally be the groom's side on the aisle's right, in front of what would traditionally be the groom's family, so that I can have the backlighting of the sunlight come from behind the folly and still be flattering 3/4 come side light in the right direction too. Hopefully, besides looking at the 3 event suites, I will get to have a look at the restaurant spaces, of which there are 2, and at least maybe have a peruse of one of the 41 bedrooms in the hotel. There are bedrooms in the main house. They go for various rungs, if you will, from cosy to luxury to deluxe, including a classic 4-poster setup and a luxury 4-poster setup. It might well be that there are guests booked into those and I haven't access. It might well be that I can quickly sneak in between a check-out and a check-in and housekeeping. Hopefully something's free to me to have a nosy at. I'm sure that if I were there at the weekend showcase, I would be able to do that all the better. And if I can get in on Friday, if things are set up, and do that, brilliant. But I'm just guesstimating, and it's not likely to be all that realistic. The classic and especially the luxury 4-poster room is set up with a freestanding copper bathtub in it, which is my idea of heaven. So I'd love to be able to get some shots of that today if I can, but we'll have to see. You've got those 41 bedrooms set up across the main house, the courthouse, and I think some of what they call the garden rooms are probably set up around the garden or courtyard. I'll let you join me to have a look when we get there shortly. So thank you to Chloe, who's one of the events and wedding coordinators here at Wentbridge, who's given me a tour this morning. She, along with Ellie, Ellie is the assigned coordinator for Carl and John's wedding, who I'll be photographing for in a few months' time in July. This is the Leatham room. Its ceremony capacity is 70. It's set up for dining and something like a conference here today. As I've walked in through main reception, you've seen me in the footage so far past the brasserie on the right. Absolutely beautiful aesthetic in there. I'll try to get in there a little bit for a few pans by the details a little later. That was newly refurbished last year. As you come down the corridor, you pass by the restaurant for the hotel on the left and the drawing room before you come toward the Leatham room. On the right, you've also passed the Tudor room, which I've given you a bit of footage of as well. There's a conference on in there today, so I'm not going to get access particularly. But to give you an idea, its aesthetic is more of a dark oak panelled room. It's available for weddings too, but of a smaller, more intimate nature, perhaps the capacity of 24. Here, you would have a wedding breakfast set up or ceremony set up of 70. Carl and John are having 70 guests throughout the day and evening. They'll be using this space for their ceremony. So if I about turn, we can imagine an aisle set up the middle here perhaps. And they'll be having an evening reception of 70 guests too, but they'll be moving on next door, as I'll show you in a moment, to the Crystal Suite. The Leatham room does also open out straight onto the courtyard, which we will discuss a little bit later. Moving on from the Leatham room, you have the Crystal Suite, which is larger. Chloe's very graciously implored me to use a little bit of imagination here because it's not set up for a showcase at the minute. Not to worry, you can get a good idea here. They are having a showcase on the 17th of March. Unfortunately, I can't get down for that because I'm at the photography show conference. I am, however, hoping to get down if it doesn't clash with the ones for Whitley Hall and Ringwood, to come down here and see the showcase that they will have on the 28th of April. This space, the Crystal Suite, has a capacity for ceremony and wedding breakfast of up to 130 guests, opening up to an evening reception capacity of 180. Here in the middle, you've got, currently hidden under another rug, the dance floor space. If you imagine that this is where, for a ceremony, you might have your central aisle, if you were going to use this for the ceremony option, then you've got a considerable space here with the natural lighting of the glazing at the end there. You might have seen some of the brochure material of beautiful faux blossom trees at the end of the aisle or the approach of the aisle for the processional versus florals along the aisle as you go. So this space can be opened up. This would be closed off during the ceremony itself, but the bar space is open to guests for the hour preceding a ceremony and then open again thereafter for the afternoon. If you've had your ceremony in the Leatham Suite, you will exit thereafter, and of course are the first to exit, via these doors. This was the view that I showed you from the other side earlier. I don't know now that I've got a filter on whether you'll be able to see back into there or not. Yes, you can just about. Having come out here, you as a couple and myself will be able to head out for some individual and couple portraits out in the gardens, perhaps at the Folly and elsewhere, which I'll show you in a moment. And of course your guests will follow. But this courtyard space can be yours to use, not necessarily for exclusive use alongside wedding guests who might also be using it, but it can be used as a setting for outdoor canapes, hog roast, etc. You also have some of the courtyard accommodation rooms out here, and there are, at least in the other suite at the other side, the more modern extension, a couple of ground floor accessible rooms too. Might well make the pocket of light from this window on the staircase an opportunity for portraiture too. What's really beautiful about the original design of this garden is that right now, facing the Folly, we are at a south-west angle, roughly speaking. If I were to orientate myself over toward this beech tree, now we're looking pretty much due south. That works beautifully for a number of reasons. If I have you imagine that the aisle is set out for an outdoor ceremony here. Carl and John, whose wedding I'm photographing in July, aren't having an outdoor ceremony. As an ex-teacher myself, I understand Carl's reticence that the first week of the summer holidays in July is a bit too much of a risk for him. Joking aside, it's not really a risk because you've always got an indoor option to retreat to at Wentbridge, and a partial refund if that happens to be the case. In Carl and John's case, they are looking to have their ceremony in the Leatham room and move on to the Crystal Suite thereafter for wedding breakfast and evening reception. If we imagine, because of this light, assuming a beautiful sunny summer's day, perhaps as teachers we ought to pick that May half term, which is always glorious, we would be in the processional coming down to what traditionally would be the groom's side on the right and the bride's on the left. in this case 2 grooms who will be getting married indoors anyway. But if I use that traditional terminology for the time being, it helps explain this a bit more clearly. I, as a wedding photographer, if couple are here ready for their ceremony and vows, often position myself to the left of the aisle from the point of view of the processional, or from this perspective now, stage right. In this case, I am more likely to position myself over here. Now, the reason that I go for either of these options is that without being too obtrusive, it's nice and upfront for close-up, beautiful portraits in the ceremony. One of the things that Carl and John have specifically asked me is that they don't want one of those sets of ceremony photographs of themselves that are lots of backs of heads. Now, for respect's sake, in religious settings and ceremonies, and indeed respect in general of the procedure, there are reasons for that, of course, to respect. Here, where I can, without being too obtrusive, I'll be fairly upfront. And in a more traditional, or perhaps I should say less traditional setting like this, I've also hopefully got the flexibility to get quite up close and personal, again without being too intrusive, for things like here, or indeed framing things with these columns. Getting back to the idea of the direction of light, remember what I said a moment ago about southwest being over here and pretty much due south for a noon ceremony being roughly over here. You've got a brilliant scenario here where the sunlight, which is coming in from this direction, will still be beautifully backlighting, side lighting, what we call in the industry rim lighting, a haloing around the hair, a hair light, with a beautiful glow, assuming that it's nice and sunny. It also gives us the opportunity that when it comes to some group photographs, I can use the pergola as a beautiful background in the afternoon, and when it's in full foliage, this beautiful beech tree to meet all needs, because we will be shooting then directly into the sun, which backlights people beautifully. The beech will allow some open shade, and I will probably come forward, and I'll bet when this is in full foliage that the boundary on the floor between where the natural shade of the tree versus the sunlight is, do you know, I bet you it's not far off here or a little bit closer. And I'll position people on that boundary whilst paying heed to the notion of a green colour cast in order to have beautiful open shade, but also in some other scenarios like the folly, have beautiful backlighting in the sunlight. I will definitely return here for evening blue hour night shots. I would love to do some off-camera flash of Carl and John here if they are up for it, with some coloured lights to light up the folly and some silhouetting. Something else that I'm determined to use when I'm here will be this hanging chair. It's currently orientated in the wrong direction since it's set aside for winter, but once this is set facing the other way, somewhere under the beach, my vision for this is that I have one of the couple sitting in it, looking out, and I have the other of the couple standing in frame somewhere around here. Now, there are two things I can do with that. I can have the person in frame be in sharp focus and their partner looking back at them in shallow depth of field, or I can do the opposite, where the person standing here is looking at me in sharp focus, and they over there are looking on in shallow depth of field. In the first scenario, they'd be sitting there sharply focused. My person standing here would be blurred looking back at them. In the other, they would be sitting there in shallow focus whilst I stand, or the partner stands, and looks back at or looks toward camera in sharp focus. Just an idea for something that is a bit more intimate and a bit more fun. So in regard to accommodation at Wentbridge House, you've got 41 bedrooms across 3 areas. You've got the main house, which includes the 2 4-poster options. I haven't got a chance to get into those today. There are actually 4 bridal suites available. There are only ever 1 wedding at once on a day, but with 4 bridal suites, you've got the idea that you can choose between somewhere for preparation and somewhere for the night if you so wish. The classic 4-poster and luxury 4-poster slightly differ. I will insert a couple of shots here courtesy of Wentbridge, thank you to Chloe. I didn't get into those today because understandably it's a normal day, they're booked out with guests. I will aim to get back here on the 28th of April to try to get at least into one of those or similar, just to see spaces there and to see the ceremony and reception spaces dressed with floristry as you would normally think. The new extension behind me also includes a couple of ground floor accessible rooms for guests if that's something that your guests need too.